All right, so we're going to go ahead and go cinematic. And here we go. We're going to talk about, of course, the emotional execution, also known as the avoidant discard. All right, so it's been a number of months, and if you've been following this channel, of course, I talk about avoidant attachment. All right, and so you'll have many people out there on both sides, right? Various perspectives, not just both sides. There are various perspectives with these type of relationships where you'll have some coaches, some influencers out there, or just people with their own testimony and experience talk from the avoidant perspective and also the so-called chaser or the person who was discarded. All right, their perspective. And so you have coaches out there who specifically take the side of the person that's discarded and talk about how heartless the avoidant is and the devastation that occurs in the wake of a discard and how it builds up and how a person can be completely blindsided, so on and so forth. And then you have the other perspective where people give their take on what it's like to be an avoidant person and the impact that it's had on their lives and how they've dealt with it on their own to become a more secure person and healing from those, let's say, childhood wounds that when we look into these experiences and testimony, most of the things in our lives are stemming from childhood, as it turns out. It becomes very difficult to talk about because now if you've got access to all that information out there, parents may get their hands on the content and materials, or you might find yourselves trying to talk about it with family and friends, during which time it's very difficult to do that because they don't understand, and some people might take offense to it. I can't tell you the times that I've tried to have a conversation with my mom or my aunts and uncles, let's say, and they don't quite understand where I'm coming from when they haven't done that reflection themselves. And so a lot of times we now have this balance to where, all right, well, we have to play in this land of forgiveness, essentially. Like, we're not here to resent people because resentment and anger, especially in the avoidant case, right, leads you to lacking self-reflection and the things that you can do to grow and learn from that experience, which is what I talk about here. This is a profound and powerful moment. You'll hear me say those exact words throughout all of my previous videos. So if this is your first video, firstly, hi, I'm Jeremy, and it's very nice to meet you. I've been documenting my experience with an avoidant discard, and as it turns out, upon reflection and taking responsibility and accountability for those things, you learn that, in fact, a person that may be the love addict, let's say, a person who consciously fears abandonment or being rejected, unconsciously fearing intimacy, to where, what was it about why I chose to be with an avoidant person? Because you are powerful as a human being. Your intuition will give you a perspective or the little hints of red flags. Okay, that's where we come up with red flags at. Intuitively speaking, we sense these things, and it's up to us whether we want to ignore these things or follow through. So for me, some powerful shit that I heard was that, well, look, man, yes, the avoidant person did those things. Yes, I was secure enough to recognize what was going on, and I set boundaries. I didn't just go be the love addict that I once was, where, yes, I had abandonment issues in my life from my father not being in the home, not being good enough, and having shame, unconscious shame in my life that led me down a path of being anxious at times in relationships and then avoidant at times in relationships in my past. I've talked about it in previous videos. And so you have these interesting dynamics where it's not just about what the avoidant is doing, because thinking about it, an avoidant is going to consciously fear intimacy and closeness. And you'll sense that from them. They will start to pull away, and we won't get into the details. We already know at this point, if you've been following my content or anybody else's, when that emotional responsibility or the responsibility for emotional intimacy comes up, and you start to give in, we expect reciprocation. That's a key word, reciprocation. And we don't get that. And when you don't get that reciprocation, there is an unconscious fear of abandonment. All right. or a conscious fear of abandonment, and you start to feel those emotions, and those emotions come out, and you start to say, what can I do? Is it something that I'm doing? So on and so forth. In my case, I was coming from a more secure place because I had done reflection years prior. But the more you know, the more you realize you don't know, and that what's required is to continue learning and investigating. Life is an experiment. Everything you do, if you're sculpting your body, if you're trying to be in good shape, I'm just finishing a workout. That's why I'm not in a shirt here. I'm just trying to stay cool and relaxed and stay in my powerful state. Like relaxed, calm, curious as to where this is going to go with the information I'm providing to everybody. Hopefully you're curious enough to listen to what I'm saying and sit with yourself and maybe perhaps come to some realizations about yourself, right? We're seeking self-improvement here and using this moment in pain. If you're just getting over this discard, or you're in the process of going through agony and the death of something, perhaps you can do some introspection and reflection. Anyway, getting back, where was I? I always go on tangents and usually get back to the center of the circle. Perhaps I will in this case. Relaxed. Where was I? Getting back. So, but in any case, you have an opportunity here to say, all right, that person was avoidant, and you sense it. I was coming from a secure place, and so I found myself starting to go back into that love addict mode that I had when I was a younger guy, like in my early 20s, mid 20s, late 20s, even early 30s, man. I didn't really wake up until I was like 33 or 34, where I started to do a lot of self-reflection and trying to understand what in the hell it was that was going on, that was a common denominator in my romantic failures. Not even romantic failures, but performance failures in professional relationships or friendships, whatever the case. And most importantly, the relationship with myself. What led to some destructive behaviors? Like for me, would have been alcohol in my life following military service, and those things, losing your identity. And then it turns out these identities, these unconscious scripts, they all play a part into our relationships. In any case, I'm thinking about all these things where an avoidance, conscious fears, intimacy, and closeness, they start to pull away, you start to go closer. And I caught myself asking myself really important questions. Man, I'm like giving in way too much because I feel like I'm kind of dicking around a bit because I'm writing a book, I'm building a website, I'm coaching people, I'm a cardiac therapist, I'm doing all kinds of things, and I'm trying to find my way into navigating into my next level. I'm trying to level up, but I find myself giving away energy and compromising the integrity of my values, my self-love, self-respect, and self-dignity, and lowering my vibration to that person. And they were actually trying to question me and saying, hey, are you willing to do this for me here and do that and do that? While I'm saying, what about you? Are you going to try to level up for me, or what's going to happen here? I caught myself giving in to that or on the verge of it. So I set boundaries, which was like something that I hadn't done. It was a breakthrough for me, but I set those boundaries, and those boundaries were firm, man. I wasn't budging on them. You can't. And that led to the discard, which I knew essentially was going to most likely come. And it was unfortunate because you have a hope that the person that the potential of that person, the person that you fell in love with, that you saw through their mask, they didn't see it, but you hope that they would kind of step into that on their own. You're patient to a certain extent, you're secure for a long time, and eventually it's like, well, nothing's happening here. I'm not seeing growth. This person's not ready for this. But you set boundaries, and over time I said, what are you willing to give into? Because are you willing to give up your higher self for this? And you should never abandon yourself, because that's what this is about to begin with, abandonment. Am I willing to become a love addict again and abandon myself?